Welcome to the forgotten history of women's suffrage. Nothing is more important than in a democracy than exercising your right to vote. And on the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage, I'm here today. I'm Wanda Sobieski, by the way, with Chris Davis, with the Election Commission, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to vote this year in particular. It's a little more challenging than normal.
Certainly COVID-19 has brought its challenges. Yes, It's very unique.
And you're relatively new at this position.
Relatively new as the administrator of elections. I've been here for about 7 years. This will be my 23rd election, actually, as working in some capacity with the Election Commission. But yeah, it's between a new paper voting system and COVID-19 and a presidential year, and everybody's all excited on both sides, or whatever side you're on. It's certainly a unique environment.
And for the people that would like to help with the election, to work at the polls, what can you tell the viewers about that?
Well, we've been very fortunate in Knox County to have an overwhelming amount of interest in working at polling places and working on our absentee ballot counting board and doing some other things to help us out. So we've been very fortunate. I don't know that other counties have been as fortunate, but University of Tennessee is here. It's the volunteers. People have volunteered and stepped up, and so we feel good about the human assets that we have going into this election.
Fabulous. And how many poll workers in various roles would you say that you train and coordinate?
We'll use probably somewhere over 800, and that'll include early voting. That will include election day. It includes obviously our absentee ballot, provisional ballot counting boards, and then just folks who are working in the office answering the phones that will be ringing off the hook pretty much from 1st of August all the way through November 3rd.
And for our viewers, what is a provisional ballot?
Well, provisional ballot essentially is a ballot that if a voter comes into the polling place, whether that's early voting or election day, and we can't find his or her voter registration, or we have reason to believe that he or she might not be registered, or there's certainly some question about their registration, we're going to have that voter, instead of turning them away, we're at least going to offer them the opportunity to vote a provisional ballot, so that if we can go back after the election and ascertain, oh yes, this person was registered, we weren't able to get that information from the Department of Safety, or maybe they registered before the deadline but somebody didn't get it to us, whatever the situation may be, then we will have that voter's vote captured and able to count it. But obviously, if a voter comes in and we can't find them in our registration database, we can't ascertain that they indeed are a registered voter, we just can't let them vote in a normal method, because then in theory, if we can't find anything on them after the election, we've let somebody who's not a registered voter cast a vote. So that's essentially what a provisional ballot is. And a typical election, it totally depends on the size of the election. We can do anywhere from 15 or 20 to, I know the last presidential election we did somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 plus, and I would anticipate we'll probably do more this time. And so it's a fail-safe for us to be able to make sure that we're capturing the vote.
Okay, well, when is the deadline for registration?
Deadline for registration will be Monday, October the 5th, and the deadline is always 30 days. It is coming up very soon. It's always 30 days prior to the election itself, and in this case, of course, obviously, most elections are on Tuesdays, so the deadline is usually the 29th day before, which is a Monday 4 weeks prior.
So how do people get registered? Where do they go and what do they do?
Well, there's a number of ways that folks can get registered. Number one, they can go, if they have internet access, they can go online. They can go to knoxvotes.org, or you can go to the Secretary of State's website, and there's a literally place to do online voter registration, where you just put in some information, assuming you've had some interaction with the Department of Safety, such as getting a driver's license or something like that. Then it's a relatively quick and easy process. The other reason we recommend folks go online is not just to get registered to vote, but if you've moved since you voted last, or if you changed your name since you voted last, then you can go in and do those things as well. And that's advantageous both to the voter and to the Election Commission, because that's less work that the voter has to do when he or she goes to the polls. Because if you go into the polls and maybe you only vote once every 4 years or once every 8 years, you may have moved since then, or you may have changed your name. And it's really, it's going to take more time for you in the polling place. And obviously, in this era of COVID-19 and social distancing, and where we anticipate long lines anyway, it's probably a good idea. If you've moved, go ahead and change your address now. Go ahead and do that online. The other way that people can register is they can either download a voter registration form off our website, or if they just want to give us a call at 215-2480, we're glad to mail them a voter registration form.
215-2480.
Now, at this late date, that may
08?
be 2480.
Okay.
Yeah. At this late date, that may be not be an option for this election, but if people can get their voter registration forms or information into us by close of business on Monday, October 5th, they'll be good to go.
Okay, all right. And how many people do you anticipate will be voting in Knoxville or Knox County?
Well, I mean, I'm planning for 200,000. I will tell you that the record in Knox County that I'm aware of, certainly in modern times, is 188,000, and I believe that was back in either 2008 or 2012.
And are the voter registration laws uniform across the state?
Yes, across all 95 counties, yes, ma'am.
Okay, and similarly, are the laws about how you vote by absentee ballot or by
Yes,
mail?
they're uniform across the state, yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
Uniform across the state?
Yes, ma'am.
But different in different states?
That's correct. Yes,
And
ma'am.
that's led to a bit of confusion with a lot of voters.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. Social media will tell you that this is the way things are, and then they may be the way things are in that state.
Right.
But you have to look at other states. And so, I have many relatives in the state of Virginia, and they're constantly posting things online about this is the way that happens and this is what happens. It's like, well, not here it doesn't, but maybe up there. So it can be confusing, certainly, just to the average consumer or the average potential voter out there.
And in Knox County, at least, in early voting, there are just a limited number of polling places, but you can go to any of them.
That's correct. Yeah, and I would say, and when the word limited, we have as many per capita probably as anybody in the state, which I'm very proud of. I know Cliff worked really hard to do that. You look at a county like Hamilton, Chattanooga. It's not quite as big as Knox, but it's not small. They're typically going to have 4 early voting spots. We have 10, and in this case, we'll actually have 11. And so we do try. Ideally we'd have 15 or 20, but finances, resources, human capital that we're able to train and feel comfortable with running high volume operations. Kind of limit us in some respects, but we make it a practice in county elections to have at least 10 out there and try and we push early voting big time. Ultimately, my goal would be at least 75% of our voters vote early or vote absentee. It makes for a smaller election day. It makes for shorter lines. We know there are going to be some diehards who vote election day, and that's okay. But I tell you, every election day, I get many, many calls from voters. My car broke down. Something happened to my pet. I have to take him to the hospital. Something happened to a relative. I have to take him to the hospital. We had three calls on election day back in August. 2 of them had been diagnosed with COVID-19. One had a relative diagnosed with COVID-19 that they lived with. They couldn't go vote that day. It's like you had 14 days to early vote. And so every time I get a call, I'm converting another person to early voting in the next election. And there really is no there's no bad aspect to early voting. We highly encourage it.
How many polling places are there for election day?
We have 79 in Knox County. And of course the trick with election day polling places is you have to vote at your polling place of record. And that's what throws many people, because when you only vote once every 4 years or 8 years, you may forget where it is. It may have moved.
How do I find out where I should go?
A number of ways you can do that. You can call our office and just give us your address. You can go online to knoxvotes.org, and there's literally a box that says, where do I vote? And it'll be posted at the end of early voting, so we don't confuse people. But they can just type in their address and it'll tell them their polling place. Those are probably the 2 easiest ways. Either give us a call or go online.
Are any of the polling places that were available for the primary not available for the general election this year?
Not that I'm aware of. No, they're all should be open.
So wherever I went for primary voting would be the same place that I should go
That
to
is correct.
actually vote.
Yes, ma'am. And for those folks who haven't voted in 3 or 4 years, you may have some voters up in the Fountain City area. If you previously voted in the Fountain City Library, you now vote at Central High School, which is we think is a much bigger venue. We feel much more comfortable with that. And if you haven't voted in 2 years or 4 years, and you vote out in Precinct 68E, we moved one of those 3 precincts from Cedar Bluff Middle to the Cedar Bluff Library. So there's just a couple of small changes, but none from August. Everything that was in August is the same.
And the University of Tennessee, I hear, may be a voting place. Is that correct?
University of Tennessee will have an early voting presence. Right now, that's scheduled to be the Baker Center. That may change. We'll see. Certainly, that's open for discussion at a upcoming election commission meeting. But we'll certainly have an early voting presence at the University of Tennessee, and of course, we do have the election day presence there at the Baker Center, as well as you go across Cumberland Avenue. And there's one at Fort Sanders School.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk for a minute about the mail-in votes, the
Okay.
absentee ballots. We've heard a lot of national news coverage, a lot of concern about there being a problem. So let me start with, in the last 20 years, are you aware of any voter fraud issues in Knox County?
No, I am not. And I think one of the interesting things that you'll note because we get a lot of calls from people who they monitor Facebook, they monitor Twitter, they pay attention to the cable news shows. One of the things you'll notice is that with all of the angst and the hand-wringing out there over absentee voting, the people you don't hear from are election administrators. We feel secure about what we do, and in Knox County, I'm certainly no different in that respect. So it's one of those things. My big concern before August was, could we handle a tenfold increase in the number of people we vote? Because in an August election, we'll typically vote somewhere between 800 and 900 people absentee ballot, and we voted over 11,000. And so you can obviously do the math. That's a record for any election in Knox County. And in the upcoming November election, we've already exceeded 17,000 requests. We still have 4 weeks yesterday. It's 4 weeks yesterday that people can still actually even request one. So do we get to 25? Do we get to 30? I don't know. A typical presidential election, you'll see about 6,000. So we're talking 25 to 30. It's going to be monumental.
Let's talk about the process of voting by mail, because a lot of people have not done that before and are obviously anxious about it, given all the talk on the news about fraud and so forth. First, I guess before that, are you aware of any incidents of fraud cases in the state of Tennessee? In the last
with regard to absentee balloting?
Yes.
Not that I'm aware of, but of course I don't monitor 95 counties worth of information either. But not that I'm aware of. No.
Okay. So if I want to vote by mail, what's the deadline to request the ballot?
Well, the deadline is October the 27th, which is by statute in Tennessee law 1 week prior to Election Day, the Tuesday before the Tuesday election. However, if you wait, and even though it's one of those things, election administrators' hands are somewhat tied, but just because the law allows you to request one up to 7 days before, we don't recommend that, because obviously you have to request it, we have to get it, we have to approve the application, we have to mail you a ballot, you have to get the ballot, you have to fill out the ballot, you have to return it to us, and it has to be in our office by Election Day, close of business.
Well, if time's short, can I take the ballot and just bring it by the Election Commission office?
Tennessee law does not allow either a ballot to be hand-delivered, and we do have no provision in Tennessee law for drop boxes, which of course is another popular rumor on Facebook and social media, that our states have drop boxes, and unfortunately Tennessee law does not. It has to be mailed back to the Election Commission, and that can include USPS, that can include UPS, that can include FedEx, but it has to be mailed back to our office.
Okay, so just to be really clear, if you request an absentee ballot, you need to request it. How far ahead would you recommend?
I'd recommend doing it today, as soon as you watch this, as literally as soon as possible. The first day that folks could request, say my words there, Wanda,
That's all right.
that people could request one was August the 5th, and we've had, like I say, well north of 17,000 requests so far, and they're going up every day. My email box is full right now with email requests that we're processing. And we do that late into the evening, even just getting those requests and processing those requests. And then you can do it all the way through October 27th. But to answer your question, the sooner the better. We want people to have time to be able to get the ballot and then get it back to us.
Because it absolutely has to be mailed. It cannot be personally delivered to the Election Commission.
That is correct.
In Tennessee.
Cannot be hand delivered. That is correct.
Okay, and that applies in every county in the
Every
state.
county across the state, same law. Yes, ma'am.
All right, and then how do I know that it's safe to mail in my ballot?
How do you know that it's safe? Well, I mean,
What steps do you, let me rephrase that, what
Okay.
steps do you take in the Election Commission
Okay.
to ensure that the ballots you receive
Okay.
are valid ballots from registered voters?
okay. Well, let me walk you through it if you don't mind.
Please, thank
So
you.
essentially, a voter's going to request a ballot, and they're going to request it on a piece of paper. Just looks just like this, and it can be there's nothing really sacrosanct about how you send this back. You can fax this back. You can email this back.
That's the application.
This is the application. And I know one of the questions that you wanted to talk about was, well, what would be some common reasons we might reject this?
Yes.
Very common reasons would be, number one, they didn't sign it. It needs to be signed. Number two, somebody doesn't put their full social security number. They don't put their full address. We need to know where to send the ballot, that type of thing. Those are the common reasons. The two most common are someone's not signed it or someone has not put their full Social Security number. That's the reason.
If you reject the application, do you notify the
Yes, we absolutely do.
applicant?
Every single one of them, yeah. But assuming they have filled this out properly and they've sent it in and we've approved it, we will then turn around and send the voter a packet that will come in an envelope looking just like this relatively big envelope, okay? And inside this envelope, the voter will open this up and they will find, obviously, they're going to find a ballot. And I just printed off a sample ballot, one pager there. But they're also going to find 2 envelopes once they open that big envelope.
This is the part that some voters get confused by.
Yeah. Well, let's walk through this. So the first thing they're going to find is they're going to find their ballot, and they're going to find some instructions with their ballot. So they're going to fill out their ballot properly, and we have very few, if any, problems with this. But when we do have a problem with someone filling out the ballot, what we do is on election night, when your ballot's returned, we'll scan all of these that are returned. And if there's an issue with a ballot, then we have a team of Democrats and Republicans that sit together literally at a computer monitor and look at the ones where the scanner had an issue reading it, and they'll literally sit there and adjudicate that ballot. So let's say someone voted for, for sake of argument, say someone voted for both Trump and for Biden. That would come through and it would scan it, it would say, well, there were too many races voted for. Okay, then the team of 2 would have to sit there and decide jointly what was the intent of this voter. Now, if they voted for 2, it's pretty clear. We can't count that. But let's say, for argument's sake, somebody put a little pin mark into Trump's and then marked it out and said, not this guy, and then marked in Biden. The 2 together can say, okay, this was most likely a vote for Joe Biden, and check that off and move on.
What if the 2 of them disagree?
My experience is they never do, because it's usually prima facie. The evidence is just pretty clear. Rarely they'll get a 3rd person involved, they'll get a 4th person involved, whatever needs to be done to adjudicate that ballot. I would tell you that of the ballots that come in that are scanned on election night, depending on the election, it can be anywhere between 5 to 10 or 11% of these ballots need to be adjudicated. And oftentimes it's because maybe someone has Parkinson's or some other way. Maybe they can't hold the pen when they're trying to fill it out, and so the scanner can't quite read it. And it's a pretty simple process of just saying, oh yeah, they meant this candidate right here. They just couldn't get the whole box filled or enough for the scanner to read it.
That's a good question. Can you fill out your ballot in pencil?
No, ma'am. It has to be a black or blue ink pen. So
not even red or
not even red.
Purple.
Scanner may not read that. No.
Okay, so you want black or blue ink on every ballot.
That is correct.
And when they mark the boxes, do they check mark, put an X on it?
We would prefer they fill the ballot box in completely, but if they do make a check mark or they do make an X, sometimes the scanner will read it, sometimes they don't. Those are the ones that have to be adjudicated, and ultimately that's what slows us down on election night, because we think we're pretty good at getting the mail opened, getting the ballots flattened, and getting the ballots scanned. What slows us down is having to go back through all these ballots that the scanner is not really clear on how to read it. So we have to have humans go back and do that. Of course, obviously at the polling place, you do that yourself. If you put it into the scanner and it kicks back out and tells you that this race wasn't marked clearly, you adjudicate it yourself there. A team of folks do that on election night. But filling this box in completely is what the voter will do. So they'll fill this.
You mark your box for the candidates you want to vote for.
That's correct.
Using blue or black ink.
Correct.
And then sign the ballot. Is there anything else you
No, you don't sign the ballot. You just you complete the ballot. Then after you're done filling out the ballot, you will find 2 envelopes in your packet. The first one is called an affidavit envelope, okay? And it's an affidavit envelope because it literally has a little flap on here. I'm going to show you. There's a little flap on it. You don't tear this off, okay? And nobody really, we don't have a problem with that, but this is the affidavit of the voter. And essentially you'll see when you get it, there'll be a little information up here with a barcode on it. And it'll just have like your name and a barcode.
And the barcode is for what?
It's your voter history. So that when we bring, I'll tell you that in just a second. But you'll take this envelope, you'll put your ballot and fold it and put it in the envelope and seal it, okay?
And it's the yellow envelope.
That's right. You'll seal it in this envelope. And then we literally check mark in red there. This is where you sign it. And we reject very few because they don't sign. I will tell you, in August we had 11,500 plus ballots that were returned. We rejected 24 out of 11,500 because they failed to sign that. And if they don't sign that, we don't have proof it's them, so we can't count it. But we even check mark it in red. Make sure this is where it's signed. So then you put your ballot in here, you seal it, you sign it, then you put it in this bigger envelope. You put postage on this envelope right there, and you mail it back to the Election Commission.
Well, on that ballot, I have another one of those with me.
Okay.
This is the one I received yesterday in the mail,
Yes,
as a matter of fact. what do I fill in for election?
You don't do any of
date?
that. The Election Commission will take care of that. In fact, this is stuff that's been there for years. All of this stuff here is going to be located in that barcode I was telling you about on the other side.
Okay, so I don't need to know my district,
No.
precinct, ward.
Now, as a voter, I hope you do know your district and your precinct, but many don't.
The
And that's-
numbers.
Yeah, people won't know those. But those are for when we use those years. And some counties may fill those out. In Knox County, we have a barcode system, which I'll get to in just a second, but the voter doesn't need to worry about that right there.
So all I need to do is fill out the flap.
Yeah. And in fact, if you don't mind, I'll use yours actually. So I'll use yours in just a second. So essentially, you put your postage on it and you mail it back. We get it in the mail just like this. Okay. We have a team that opens these, pulls this affidavit envelope out. I'm gonna borrow yours actually, if you don't mind. Just the envelope. Yeah. And so your ballot is in this envelope. Okay. You've mailed it back to us. And you'll see this little barcode right here, and I don't want to give away any personal information, but we know it's Wanda. But there's a little barcode here, and when we get that back in the office, we do two things. Number one, we scan that barcode, and that shows right away, puts you into our Election Commission system that Wanda Sobieski has cast a ballot. Period. Boom. You're good. Your voter history will then indicate.
So if I were to mail in another one, what would happen?
It would already show that you have a voter history. It wouldn't let you do that. So
Or if I showed up at the polls?
it'll catch you. It'll say ballot issue, and so we can't vote you a regular ballot. We'd have to vote you a provisional ballot, like we talked about earlier.
And what if I request an application for the mail-in ballot and then later decide I'd rather go to the polls?
It's still going to show ballot issued. If your application was approved, it's going to show ballot issued. Now, one way or another, if you vote provisional, and let's say you never returned your absentee ballot, then your provisional will ultimately count. If you did return your absentee ballot, the provisional won't count. Make sense?
Okay, so
Yeah.
I only get to vote once.
That's correct. One person, one vote.
And
That's right.
that barcode makes that secure.
That's correct. And then after we scan the barcode, we look at this signature. And we compare the signature here with the signature on your voter record. And we make sure that those match.
That would be what you got on the application?
No, well, that would actually be what we have on your original voter registration form. And a lot of people have concerns that, well, my signature's changed in 30 or 40 or 50 years. I will tell you, we have worked with the Sheriff's Department to look at handwriting analysis. We're even looking for trends and for little things in the signature. We, out of 11,500 plus absentee ballots that were received back in August, we rejected 14 for not having a signature that was even close to matching. And oftentimes my feeling is it's probably a husband signing for a wife or vice versa, something like that. Because we do take into account that sometimes people develop maybe arthritis or something like that later in life, and we see a lot of those where people can't hold a pen. And so we're looking for any just telltale sign that this signature is going to match. And I will tell you, I was talking to friends in a neighboring county who had far fewer absentee ballots than we did, and they rejected 60 out of whatever their number was. I feel pretty good that we're looking at these signatures, we're verifying these signatures, but ultimately, overwhelming majority of them count. And we're making sure that there's no fraud, but at the same time, we're trying to give the benefit of the doubt that this is the voter because he or she has filled that out to our satisfaction. And then after we do that, we verify the signature, we scan the voter history, we take this, we don't remove the ballot yet, we drop it into a locked ballot box that literally has a red lock and a blue lock on it, and it sits until election morning when we literally have a Democratic and a Republican election commissioner respectively come down and unlock. I guess in August we unlocked about 45 absentee ballot boxes, give or take. I'm thinking more like 75 this time, maybe more, but they'll do that on election morning per Tennessee law. We'll dump these out. We'll start opening them, flattening them, and then scanning them and adjudicating them. And that's essentially how we handle the ballots. And I will tell you one last step I didn't mention because I don't want to give the impression we're tying a voter to a vote. On election morning, when we take these out of the box, we verify there's a signature, and then we remove this affidavit and place it aside and move the envelope over here and then open the envelope because we don't want to tie a voter to a vote. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, we want to make sure that that's ultimately a secure process so that I don't know how Wanda Sobieski voted, for instance.
You're not going to come out and tell my neighbors how I voted.
That's right. That's right.
It's good.
That's correct.
Because from the way the signs are disappearing in some neighborhoods, it makes me wonder how safe it would be if you put the word out.
Yep.
Okay, so if you get this the absentee ballot in the mail, how far ahead would you recommend? A lot of people are worried. Let me start this over again.
Sure.
A lot of people are worried that the mail is slow, that something has happened to slow down the mail, and What if their ballot doesn't get there in time to be counted? Does the postmark count, or do you have to actually receive it?
It has to be received, and what I anticipate that we'll do, we did in August, and we'll try and do it again in November, I anticipate we'll do this, is work with the post office, particularly there at Wise Garber, the biggest post office probably in East Tennessee, so that if you can get your absentee ballot in this envelope with postage to the Wise Garber post office by a certain time on election day, we'll go and do one last mail run to make sure that we're getting every ballot that we can. And I will tell you, I think that last mail run on August the 6th generated maybe 120, give or take, extra absentee ballots that normally we wouldn't have gotten. So,
wow.
And we, out of the 11,500 we received, you can add to that about 160 that we were not able to count because we received them after election day. And that's, you know, as an election administrator, that's frustrating to me because, you know, I want every ballot in here that I can because more ballots mean bigger margins. From my basketball background as an official, I hated 1-point games. I don't like close games. As an election administrator, I don't like close elections. I like margins. And every ballot that we get in helps us to, you know, obviously achieve that goal. So.
And how much postage?
Just a normal first class stamp.
Okay.
Then I don't know what that is now, 50 cents, 55 cents, I don't know what it
55
is.
cents.
But whatever it is,
Just one stamp,
just one
a
stamp.
regular forever stamp will do it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I know this is an incredibly busy time, and for taking the time to talk with us. And
I hope this reaches a lot of voters, and appreciate you thinking of us.
Hope our viewers can understand why it was so important. You know, women spent 72 years fighting for the right to vote. How many women do you think vote? What kind of percentages do you know?
I don't know. I asked our IT department that this morning. They're running some numbers for me. I would assume it's probably pretty representative of the population as a whole, but I don't know that I have any hard numbers to be able to tell you that.
Okay, that would be something interesting. I certainly would encourage everyone, and man for that matter, to get out and vote this year. It's an important election. All of them are important.
Absolutely.
But this one has more attention, I think, than most have received.
Absolutely, yeah, we're seeing that.
In a very long time. Did you know, we have a section called Did You Know? And very briefly, Elizabeth Avery Merriweather, who stands represented on the statue on Market Square that the Suffrage Coalition put in Market Square, voted in the 1872 election, years before 1920. The 14th Amendment had just passed, and she relied on the language in the 14th Amendment that created some ambiguity to try to get in to vote. She doesn't know whether her vote was counted. That same year, of course, Susan B. Anthony and 14 of her friends voted in Rochester, and Susan B. Anthony was arrested. She was put to trial. She was not allowed to testify because women were considered legally incompetent. So the judge ordered the jury to find her guilty, and she was found guilty for voting illegally. Now she could vote, and because of her, we can vote. And I certainly hope none of us miss the opportunity to vote this year. Thank you so much, and thank you for being with us. And if you have any questions at all, call the Election Commission, and they'll be happy to help you out because they're there to make sure that your vote is honored.
Thank you.
Thank you.